Hello, PBL. It is Lindsey Blackburn, and I am a PBLMatters facilitator through the Fairfield County Educational Service Center. And I am joined today by Mario Basora. He is the superintendent at Huber Heights in the Dayton area of Ohio, former superintendent at Yellow Springs School District. Mario, welcome.
Thank you. Great to be here.
Thanks for joining us. We're just going to talk a little bit about your experience. If you could just tell us briefly how you got to the position you are today and kind of how you got going with project-based learning.
Great. Yeah. So I was a teacher in Cincinnati for several years and social studies in middle school and high school in one district. And then I became an assistant principal and a principal after that in a couple districts. And eventually I moved to the Dayton area from Cincinnati and became superintendent. And I've been superintendent in two districts. I was in Yellow Springs for 9 years, and I am in my first year in Huber Heights City Schools. Huber Heights is a much bigger district than Yellow Springs. There's 6,000 students here, and in Yellow Springs we had 700 students. And so it's a very different kind of experience and school system.
You sort of visited project-based learning schools. You've been a school leader in PBL environment. You're a parent of kiddos in PBL environment. What are two memorable projects?
I really enjoy a math project in 7th grade that I saw that was really amazing. And this one was a project where kids, we had a problem in our school district, and it was that we had we needed laptop carts. We could afford the laptops, but we couldn't afford the carts for teachers to place them in, in school and in class. And so this great 7th grade math teacher came up with an incredible idea that why don't we have our kids build the carts, and I could do it as my measurement unit. So, well, what a cool idea. So what he did, as soon as kids came in to the school at the start of the school year, he started his measurement unit and had the kids pair up and do a project where they met with a teacher. They did a whole empathy building process and design process, and figured out what the teacher needed and wanted, did some prototyping with paper, and then moved to cardboard, and then ultimately ended up at Lowe's for a whole day, for a morning, where the kids took a bus and went all out to Lowe's. They had so many dollars that they could spend with their team on their project, and then they spent that money and came back to the school and started building. And they built the project, did some more prototyping with it, and I don't remember this prototyping more, sort of getting feedback, and they literally used the saw. They literally learned how to nail everything together. They painted it in art class, and then they presented these projects to their teachers. And it was a really great way to learn measurement at the beginning of the year. And so that was super powerful. I love that project because it's authentic. There was a real need within the school. I love it because a lot of times we hear people say that math is not a subject that works well with PBL. And I think I love it because it took a little bit of time, but ultimately I think that's sort of, so when folks say, talk about time issues and how you can, I think it's one of the biggest challenges we have with assessment is that the time it takes to do really high quality projects and student driven work is often more than what you'd see in a traditional setting. And so we have to figure out a way to be more flexible with that. So that's the first project. The second project, I'll see if I can go down to a much younger grade level. We'll go to kindergarten. So we'll go on the exact opposite end. Another area where people say it's very difficult to do project-based learning work. So we had kindergartners who were we had an open playground in the school where folks from the community or visitors to the town, because we live in a little tourist town, Yellow Springs, could go and they would use the playground on the weekends, and then the kids would come back on Monday and their playground would be trashed, with trash, cigarette butts, all kinds of things on their playground. And so they'd have to come to school to this playground that was, really not taken care of over the weekend. So the kids were concerned about this, and they were upset, and they shared it with their teacher, and the teacher got this idea of creating a project around it. And so what they did is they did a shared writing project where the kids came up with a whole letter to the editor for the newspaper. And they wrote a letter to the editor of the newspaper as a shared writing project in class, did some editing and published it and sent it in, basically explaining to the whole community how we need to do better about cleaning up the playground and how poorly it was and how smoking's bad for you. It was great. And then they collected data like the week after that went in the newspaper to see, how the cleanup went to the playground and how bad it was. And they noticed that after the letter, the playground was much cleaner every day when they came back to school than before the letter. So they figured that had an impact. And in addition, they did some fundraising and got some signs put up of rules that they created for their playground. And they did drawings of all the spots that they were going to put them in. And so these really cool drawings with some very clear rules on them. And one of them had to do with the sandbox that was still there. And, they want to make sure people put the cover back on the sandbox after they use it because, otherwise cats will think it's a litter box, and so that was a really cool project. And those are my two favorites, I think, that we engaged in.
There was one project where one of your students was in a wheelchair and she went around the main street. As you said, you're in a touristy town, Yellow Springs. She went around the main street and figured out all the places that were not wheelchair accessible. And that was a super high impact project for your community. So that was one that stuck in my head.
That was very cool. Yeah, that was a great project. Yeah.
Okay, so we call this video series Teacher Toolbox. So I'm curious, what is a common challenge that you see teachers face when they're implementing project-based learning? And what is sort of an idea or solution that you've often been able to share with them or you can share with us?
What I would share is the idea of really just trying to get kids, keep them on task, and on a timeline for projects. That's a big deal, right? Because you give them some level of rope or freedom to do their work with. And I think they oftentimes, will not do the work until the very last minute. And ultimately it leads to projects being extended, of poor quality, et cetera, and lacks motivation from kids too as well. And so it frustrates teachers. And so that's a real problem, right? That often happens. And sort of the solution to that I've seen over time, with great teachers, what they do is it's not much different than you do in other projects you do in classrooms, which is to scaffold the work in a way that there's frequent assessments on a regular basis. And when I say on a regular basis, I'm talking about every day or every couple days to ensure kids are progressing through the project and having due dates for different pieces of it at different times and making it very clear when things are due and what is expected, and doing a lot of peer feedback throughout that process as well for each of the pieces of work that are done throughout the process. And that scaffolding and giving sort of micro due dates along the way really help keep kids focused and on track. I do think that's really a challenge, especially at the beginning when you're first doing the work. But after a while, you can kind of give kids more freedom and loosen things up a little bit because they learn processes on their own, and it becomes helpful. So that's one piece of advice I'd share.
Yep, great tip. And sometimes we have teachers come to our trainings who are really gung-ho about project-based learning. They're like the only one in their building. We call them lone rangers. Since you are on the other end of that in the administrative role, what advice would you give to the lone ranger? How could their administrative team be supportive to them or help them through the process? What if they're encountering some sort of pushback or hesitation from their admin team? What would you say?
Yeah, so I think I would obviously start by talking to your admin team. And if that doesn't work and you're getting that pushback, as you said, I think you work within your sphere of influence, right? So I think what you try to do is you do the work with kids within your classroom, and you engage your parents strongly in the work. And so you do the things that other schools do, but you do it in your classroom. So you have an exhibition, you have presentations of learning, you do a lot of the work where you bring experts in as panelists to really help support the work as well. And then you get your parents to give you feedback and get survey data from kids and parents and you invite your administrators to all of these events so that they can see for themselves what's happening and how parents are seeing it and the feedback that they're getting. I think, you have a panel discussion with your kids, and you get the kids to talk to the principal as well, bring the principal in to hear some of that. Those are the things that I think are super important. And, I wouldn't stop also at the principal level. I would bring in curriculum leaders at central office, even the superintendent, inviting them to come see what's going on. I think those are the kinds of things that can really help support the work long term, especially if you can get parents to buy into the work, and your parents come and participate in exhibition and other events, and you have the support of your parents. I think that really helps. Parents are particularly important in this process because ultimately they drive a lot of what we do in education, and they are our students are our customer ultimately, but their parents are their advocates. Mm-hmm. And so I think it's super important to talk with parents about what you're doing, and for parents to support it, because if you have that support of your parents, ultimately it can inoculate you from significant criticism and negative feedback from administration. Another idea is to bring parents in at the beginning of the unit or the year and say, this classroom's going to be a little bit different, and here's what we're doing, and here's why we're doing it. And, and get feedback from parents about that, and, along the way.
Great tips. PBL Works actually sells this small, tiny booklet about project-based learning, and it's geared specifically to parents and community. So nice. In the case that you had a little beginning of school year meeting or something, that would be that's coming to mind as a good resource. Okay, we always end these sessions with the same question, which is, why PBL?
Huh. Why PBL? Just 2 words, huh?
Why PBL? Specifically vague, purposely vague, yes. Which is how we like to be PBL in general.
Take it all kinds of places, I'm sure. Okay, so here's my why. Ultimately, I got into the profession of education and to be a teacher because I wanted to make a difference in the lives of students, specifically at-risk students and students from poor backgrounds, and who may or may not be disengaged in school for a variety of reasons. I see PBL and PBL-like work happening in private schools across the country. I've seen it for a long time. I've seen it happening in gifted programs across the country. I've seen it for a long time. But too often it doesn't happen in schools that have the most high-risk populations, in schools where test scores aren't the best, or, for every student. And I just feel like if it's good enough for your top kids, it should be good enough for all kids. And I believe that PBL is a route in a way to get at kids truly engaging and learning and being empowered by learning, and really having a lifelong love of it that develops, as a result of the work. So, and will give them a qualitatively different experience than other kids, and hopefully will save their lives and help them be more productive citizens who make a difference in the world.
Yep. And you said something at the beginning of this that also is something that I say, which is that I want my own kids doing PBL.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yep.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much for your time. We really appreciate you giving us your thoughts as a leader in this community.
Thank you, Lindsay. I appreciate all the work you're doing, and everybody, across the state.